Welcome to this video. My name's Beckham. If you're watching on YouTube, please can I ask you to consider subscribing to my channel, and if you click that notification bell, you will be notified when I post new videos. If you visit my website, you'll find all these videos can be downloaded to your desktop in full HD. First impressions are always going to be important in audio-visual, because we're trying to let the viewer know right from the start that this presentation is worth watching. One of the ways we can achieve this is with good, well-presented opening titles, and to help that, we can take a look at text with masks. Just before we start any work in PTE-AV-Studio, take a look at the short demo coming next. You'll notice that I've added some sound effects to the demo, which can play an important first impressions role too. It helps to set the scene, as in fact our title does. The addition of the flare on the lighthouse was created in Photoshop. It's the only thing that was created there, but we can think of that as an optional extra perhaps, but I'll show you how it was created a little later. Now, as you saw in the demo, we can use hard edge masks, as in the lighthouse, or soft edged, which works better for clouds or water. Whatever movement we create with our text, remember, we can very easily reverse that movement for effect. So let's make a start in PTE-AV-Studio with a blank and our lighthouse image. I am going to need a little more slide time, so I'm going to click the little box at the bottom right corner, and I'll push that up to about 20 seconds. We can always adjust that a little bit later. For now, we just need a little bit of space to work. So with the image selected, we can open the Objects and Animation screen. The first thing we need to do is to remove the bounding box from the image in the center of the screen. In fact, deselect it from the bottom right corner. Because my cursor is up at the top left, if I click into the grey area, that will do that for me. Then I can select my mask, and the option I want is add a mask template. Now I'm going to go to the style first, and we'll change that to a rectangle. I don't need the blur, and I don't need the corner radius. I'm going to make this the same size as the show I'm making, 1920 by 1080, and when I click OK here, my image is going to disappear. because what we've just done is to place a mask, there it is there, the mask rectangle, over the entire contents of the image, therefore hiding it. The image is still there, it's just hidden. The next stage is to select the mask content. I'm going to right click and add an image, and the image I'm going to add is the same one. While we've got a selection on the mask content, which is Byron Light, I'm going to right click that also, and I'm going to add text. What I need to do here is to type whatever text or title I want and to adjust the color. You can see the title that I've chosen. Don't forget that when we adjust text, we do so in the text box up on the top right, not on top of the image itself. The next thing I need to do is to adjust the color, but before I do that, I really need my Byron Bay light in the position it's going to be when it's being viewed in the slideshow. So I'm going to do that with click and drag. I'll bring it over to this point here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller too. Something like that should do me. So now I can go to my color, because I'm going to use an option I demonstrated in a previous video where I click on the eyedropper tool, and if you're using a mouse you would keep the left mouse key depressed. I'm using a graphics tablet, so I have to click and hold the eyedropper on the surface, or my pen on the surface, because I can scroll around and I can find a color from within my image, and that looks pretty good because it always adds a bit of balance in my view. It sort of makes it in harmony with the rest of the image and the colors, so okay to that. Now just for a moment I'm going to go to my animation at the top right. I'm going to put my cursor over the pan X. Remember, pan X is left and right, and I'm going to move my text to the right. The only reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to adjust the mask stencil. So it would be good to be able to see the text as I mask it away. So if I select the mask, you can see a bounding box around the outer edge. I'm going to use a shortcut key here, but you can go up to the zoom and break the chain link there. Touch it once and we can change the width and the height independently. When it's locked they'll change together, but a nice quick way of doing it is hold the shift key, because what I want to do here is drag this in. We can't see a great deal until we get to that sort of position, and that doesn't look too bad to me. Sometimes if you feel that you can do this more accurately with the cursor in the box, then break the chain link, put your cursor in there and use the up and down arrows. But I think that's going to be pretty good. I'm going to leave the edge of my mask sharp. I'm not going to add any blur to it. And just for the moment, if I go back to my text and I click and drag once more, there you can see the effect of what we're going to achieve. Now we just need to animate it. Let's do that. I'm going to put my cursor into the pan X box because the text isn't quite central, so I think I'll just move it to the left. So that's the position I want the text when it comes to a stop. So what I've got to do now is to decide how many seconds I want to view the main image before the text starts to appear. So I think we'll allow it to come on screen over the 2 seconds. I think I'm going to allow maybe another 3 seconds, so I'm going to put my first text keyframe at around the 5-second point. And at that particular point, of course, I need my text to be tucked behind the mask. But before I do that, I'm going to right click and clone a keyframe. Because the cloned keyframe, I can keep the position that I've chosen here. So if I go back to the first keyframe, I can now go back to my pan using either click and drag over the X, or in my case I'm going to put my cursor in the box hit my up arrow and tuck my text away inside the mask. All we've got to decide now is how long it's going to take for the text to come out and stop gently on screen for us to enjoy the title. I think we're going to need 4 or 5 seconds for that. Now we're close to 10 seconds with this keyframe here, so let's make that a bit more precise so we can see exactly where we are. But there's one other thing we need to do. Clicking on the keyframe that starts the animation, we need to consider speed. Now we're starting the animation of the words here hidden, so we could use one of 2 speeds. We could use slow down, but we could also use smooth. Let's try slow down and see how it looks. So up at the pan we need to add a modifier, add speed and slow down. Now we can do a quick preview here by putting our cursor back to the start and pressing play. At least we get a feel before we do a full screen preview if we've got enough time for the Byron Bay light to slide out from behind the lighthouse and come to a gentle stop. And I think 5 seconds looks just about right. Now if we want the words to leave the screen before the image, as I think I did in my demonstration, then of course once the text appears on screen we've got to decide how long it sits there. Well, because we're actually reading the title as it comes out, I don't think we actually need it there very long at all. I'm going to guess at about 3 seconds. Of course we can always change that, so right click and clone a keyframe. I'm going to put that at the 13-second point, because between 10 and 13 we want nothing to happen, just sits there. But now we want the, well, I suppose we could have it sliding back behind the tower itself, but I would like something a little different, so I'm just going to go for a straight fade off. So something around a second I think is enough for that. But on this keyframe of course what we're going to need is the opacity at 0. You can right click over the A and select 0. Now I think we would probably need to do a full screen preview. Now those timings looked okay to me, so I would be happy to use that as the introduction to my slideshow. For those of you who may be Photoshop users or maybe Photoshop Elements, I'm going to select the image we're using. I'm going to hit Ctrl W to open that up in my image editor, because what I'm going to do here is create a duplicate and add a little bit of flare. To add the flare we need to go to our filter menu and select render and lens flare. You can make a choice of whichever lens flare you like best. I think I settled on the one at the top. We can choose the brightness here, as you can see, and we can even move this around if we wanted to position the light something in that way. And that's the sort of thing that I did. And then we need to make it as bright as we need it. Whatever we choose, click OK. Now we need to save this, but we need to save it with a slightly different name, of course. Now, having saved that as Byron Light Flare as a JPEG, I brought you back into PTE-AV-Studio and also the Objects and Animation screen. Because what I want to do is to create another image which is going to flash on and off screen just when we want it. Now to do that I need to lose the selection on my text, and we can do that by clicking into the grey area. Then I'm going to add an image, and the image I want of course is the one that contains the lens flare. When I open it up it's going to sit right at the top of the stack. So it's going to cover up all of our animation. So what we need to do here is to immediately go to the opacity, right click and set it to 0, because the keyframes we're going to apply to the Byron light flare layer is just going to be enough to bring it on screen and off. So we're going to need 3 of these for every time the light flashes. So I'm going to use shortcuts here, Alt Insert and Alt Insert. So I've got 3 cloned layers. It may be useful to hold the Control key and select the text layer as well as the Byron light flare. That way we get to see the other keyframes, and that may help us when we're trying to position these, because what I'd like to do is to put the light flaring maybe just a little bit before the text appears. So a little bit of trial and error here. How much distance do we want between these? We'd need to do a couple of tests. I seem to recall it was something like that. So here we have that Byron light flare layer with 0 opacity. So this one we need to return and set that back to 100%, and this one we need to stay on 0. So just for this little test, I'll put my cursor back, press play and take a look. Well, that looked okay to me, but we're all going to make slightly different choices here with those 3 keyframes. And in my original demo I had the light flashing twice. I had it flashing somewhere up here when the text was fading off screen. So we just repeat whatever we've done there, and there is our text and our special effect. Now, as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, there's been quite a change in the objects and animation screen, because what we need to do to bring the text out of the clouds or back into the clouds is exactly the same as what we did with the lighthouse. So maybe we could use this as a quick recap. Click into the grey area to deselect the image, apply the mask template. I'm going to go to my rectangle. I'm not too concerned about the blur or the corner radius. This isn't absolutely essential what I'm doing here, but when it matches the size of the slideshow, at least when you apply it, I think it gives people a feel for what the mask is actually doing. Then we need to select the mask content, right click and add the same image once again. And while we've got that image selected, we can add the text, right click, add text, and we need to type the title we want. Well, you can see what I've chosen, and the first thing I need to do is to go to the animation screen. I want to get the text to the size that I think I'm going to need it. I think I'll live with something like that. I think it needs to be lifted up just a little bit. I'd like that to be the point my text appears or settles at when we have finished the animation. So I'm going to have mine dropping out of the clouds above. So all I need to do really before I start the animation here, and that's going to be exactly the same as the lighthouse, and that's to select a color. Now, as you can see, I've gone ahead and adjusted the color of my text using the method I described before, using the eyedropper tool. What we need to do next is to adjust the mask, but maybe it would be a good idea to adjust the text first so we know exactly where it's going to fall from. So if this is the end point, let me move that up a little bit. I'm going to hit Alt Insert to create a clone. So once again, we've got to decide the timings here. Last time I had my text appearing after 5 seconds, and that worked pretty well. So that wouldn't be a bad place to start. So at 5 seconds, we need the cradle mountain up in those clouds. So let me put my cursor into my pan Y, hit the down arrow to lift it up into the clouds. I may even decide to do a little rotation as well. So the down arrow there just to give it a bit of a turn, and maybe even up a little bit more. So the animation is going to be from that point, and it will be hidden in a moment, to this point, and we've got to decide how long we want that to happen. Last time I think we chose about 5 seconds, but there was a much greater distance to travel. So maybe using a bit of common sense here, we'll drop that back to about 4. So we'll make our second keyframe at the 9-second point. So if we select the first keyframe, we can now go to our mask, select that, hold the Shift key, click the toggle at the top, and we can bring that down until it covers the text. And you'll notice as I did that, the edge was very sharp. Well, that's what I created. So why don't we go to our blur here. Let's put about 25 in the blur. I'll put my cursor back at the start here, press play, that looked pretty good. All we need is a little bit of speed and we're done. So making sure we've got the first keyframe selected, we need to go to the top right. In the pan controls we need to add a modifier, and I'm going to choose slow down. Not forgetting we've got a small amount of rotation, so we would match the speed there. And that's going to work pretty well. Let me just put my cursor just before that actually moves and press play. And it should be a lot sweeter when it comes to rest just above the mounting. The rest is identical to what we've done before. If we want the text to fade out a little bit later on, then we've got to decide on a point when it sits there, and then the next keyframe which will fade it off or move the text off screen in another way. Now, as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, we do have a completely new image here. We're going to go through much the same process, but with just a little difference. I'm going to lose the selection around the lagoon picture, go to my mask, and I'm going to select add a mask, but this time I'm going to select image or video. And the image I'm going to select is the image that I've got down in the bottom right corner, the one you can see on screen. And you can see exactly what that's doing. Then we need to do something very similar to what we did before. We're going to go to our mask content, we're going to right click, we're going to add an image, and that image is going to be again the same one. And then once again we'll right click the lagoon and add our text. We'll type our text and put it in the position we want it to start the animation. There you can see the text that I've chosen and also the position I want the text when the animation completes. I've got white text here, I haven't changed the colour. The zoom is much the same as what come up on screen automatically. I think 15% is about right here. Maybe a little smaller, but I'm happy with 15%. I've got 2 keyframes now, and I've given myself 4 seconds for the image to appear from behind the tree up on the left hand side. Maybe that's a bit tight. I may increase that actually to 10 because the distance is very similar to what we did with the lighthouse, and that worked pretty well. So I'm going to put my cursor back to the starting point, and I'll use click and drag here to move my lagoon up into that position. But then I'll use the cursor in the zoom box and the the down arrow, to make the text quite small, and using the pan Y, let's come down a little bit and maybe in a little bit. So the text is well hidden behind there. And all we've got to do really is just add a bit of speed. So I'm going to be using pan and zoom, so with the keyframe selected that starts the animation, pan modifier, we'll go for slow down, and zoom. We'll do the same there. Now I was just about to say let's put my cursor just before this keyframe and see how that looks, but I've just had a thought. It may be nice to have a little bit of rotation here as well. So I'm going to go back to the rotation and I'm going to add as much as I can get away with. Something like that. I'll move it up just a little bit. These are the sorts of things that happen all the time, of course. We change our mind on the fly, but of course I've added now another aspect of animation that needs speed. So I'm going to match that with slow down. Now I will put my cursor just before that first keyframe. Press play and we can take a quick look. And that looks a little bit on the far side to me. Now I can do one of two things here. Maybe I've chosen the wrong speed here. Maybe the speed here should be smooth. Or I could give more time. Let's try giving more time. Let me try 2 seconds. Cursor just before, press play. I think these sorts of settings are going to be purely personal, but let me put my cursor back here. I'm going to go and remove these, and I'm going to add in their place smooth. One, two, three. I'll leave the extra time for the moment, but what I'm doing here is pretty typical of what I do. You know, I think that looks pretty good. I think I'd be happy to live with that. So I think PTE-AV-Studio masks used in conjunction with text can add some really nice effects, and it's worth some experimentation. To bring this video to a close, I've just put together one or two other examples using exactly the same techniques in this final demonstration. Thanks for watching, and if you feel inclined, come along and take a look at our forum at the address on screen.